So, learning designers are especially tuned into how everything's always shifting. I mean, change is like the only constant. But here's the thing, both organizations and individuals often push back against change. So, how do we, as learning designers, as well as just people, adapt to an ever changing world? Dr. Zlata Gromova, a learning and development expert, discusses a research paper out of Cornell University that lists 4 elements of resistance to change. And she has an interesting insight on how these elements of resistance to change can be flipped and viewed as pillars of adaptation to change instead. Let's dive in.
The studies on change resistance broke down the resistance to change into 4 elements. They go as cognitive rigidity, emotional reaction, routine seeking, and short-term focus. So cognitive rigidity, that would be us not being ready to accept new concepts or new ideas. This is when we go as, okay, we've always done it this way and there is no other way. Or when we say, this place is not as it used to be, or things like that. Then emotional reaction, this is the level of intensity of our emotions about certain change. So that's when my gym changes the timetable, I go like, excuse me, what do you think you're doing? But then, with the time, I adapt to it surely. Then routine seeking, that's us finding comfort in repeated things, the milestones, right, or the anchors within our day or within our lives that give us stability, that give us the sense of continuity. So if you prefer your coffee a certain way, of a certain brand, with a certain amount of milk, that could be one of the routines that you find comfort. And once losing it, for some reason, I know there's been a disruption in the supply chain, that can actually make a person feel very uncomfortable. And then the other one is short-term focus. That's a little bit related to the marshmallow test, maybe in some people's heads. So that's the extent to which the discomfort now prevents us to achieve the advantages and benefits in the future. So I feel super annoyed about learning something right now that I fail to see how good it's going to be for me in the future. And so these are these elements of resistance to change. But I think by studying them and by looking at them, you can find ways to actually flip them and see them as pillars of adaptation to change. So not necessarily that you have to kind of avoid or do something about it. So if we start, let's say, with the cognitive rigidity, right? So people being very set in their mindset, in their beliefs, in the way they do things, not being ready and not being open to other ways of doing things. So to them, an L&D expert, what they could do, they could use play and games to get these people to experiment. What I mean is that even within a educational product, regardless of the topic, you can place people in the, say, imagine something, right? We know that games and the play setting is perceived by the brain just like the same experience as you would experience it in the real world, but it feels safer because, well, it's a game, right? It's not for real. So if you get these people to imagine and to try and to experiment in a game-like setting, the things that they wouldn't normally do, that would actually make them less rigid, and that would allow them to kind of become flexible in terms of their mindset or in terms of the things that you want them to be more open about. If we talk about emotional reaction, well, I think that's, of course, emotional awareness, emotional savviness, and management of emotions. So overall, a lot is going on the internet about it. And just like feedback could be, and skills of feedback could be integrated into any course, right? You're teaching people business analysis, but in parallel, you're kind of packing into it, if it's a cohort-based learning, how to give feedback correctly. The same thing with management of emotions. These are extra things you can attach to the learning products and teach people these things parallel to the main subject of whatever you're teaching or you're providing training on. Then the short-term focus. Well, short-term focus is something that you need to put people on the spectrum. So you need to stretch their horizon and you need to kind of show them that, okay, between here and the future, there's this whole way that you can go. And that's about creativity and about, the ability to notice things. Like when people learn how to be grateful for stuff, right? They normally don't notice that you can be grateful for the good weather or for the fact that your head is not aching today. The same here. People may not be used to think about things in a certain way, and you can help them just see that. So one example would be, say right now, a lot of Ukrainians are displaced and they are located in other countries. And since they're spending a lot of time there comes a question of the foreign language, right? Of the local language where they are. And a lot of people resist that, saying like, why should I don't want to, I'm under a lot of stress already, they're making me. And that's very understandable for the context they're in. But what could be helpful to them is to think, okay, that's super annoying to be learning this language, and maybe I will go back to my native country later, but if I do this now, what do I get in the long-term perspective? Say, okay, while I'm learning, I'm training my skill of learning, and that's a skill I will always need. I'm gaining knowledge in the foreign language, and that always looks good on the CV. I will have better connections with the local people. I will always have this other place to go back to just in case. I will have something as a souvenir that I bring back with me. I have this new experience of learning a foreign language. Maybe I have never tried that before. Or if I've never learned a foreign language, this is the time where I start. So you have, and the list can go on and on. And if you ever find yourself in a situation like that, you can pause the video and start by listing like 10 ways that this could be good for you in the long term. And the first 3 can go easily, but then the rest 7 would be much harder. And if 10 is easy, then do 50 and you'll see that it's not, may not be as easy. So this is how you can help the people you're providing training for turn these short-term focus into long-term focus. So the fourth one, so we talked about cognitive rigidity, emotional reaction, we talked about short-term focus, and one that's left is routine seeking. Routine seeking, I think actually in the learning environment, maybe you will help me out with that. I think it's not as big of an obstacle in the learning context, because routines, they normally are the things that we find on our daily basis in the regular life. So maybe if you're in the organization that has been doing learning a certain way and the learning itself changes, then yeah, the routines will be broken. So with the routines, the way to handle that and to kind of mitigate resistance is to organize familiarity. So the things that sound, look, and feel familiar from the old ways, they could be integrated in the new ways. So like I said, we don't need to drop everything. So some things, and maybe you had a mascot in your courses before that could also travel to the new ones as well. Or inventing new routines that give you the same feeling or function for you in the same way as the old ones. Say, I like this one coffee shop where I get my coffee. And no other coffee shop is as good as this coffee shop. So if I was forced to change that routine, I would look for ways that give me the same comfort, right? So, what is it? That's a way to start my day. That's a ceremony. That's a routine. So, maybe if now I live in a different setting, I would be having breakfast with my neighbor or something like this, right? So, see what other new routine could be doing the same that the old one was doing for you. But I still feel like this routine seeking and changing that in the learning setting, maybe not as a powerful factor of resistance. Aras, what do you think? Anything comes to mind?
The only thing that's sort of coming to mind is the natural inclination to want to incorporate learning into life. So, pretty much everything you do in life. Something that you always go back to. Whether
Mhm.
it's maybe you need to force yourself in the beginning to get into the routine. For instance, I'm trying to get into the routine of working out at least twice a week again now, after not having worked out for a long time now, just trying to go back to the gym routinely. That's difficult in the beginning. Then it becomes easier, and then it kind of becomes a part of your life. When it comes to learning, setting up micro habits that incorporate different learning. Maybe every morning you want to read about a specific topic. Recently, for instance, I got interested in strategy. So I was like, okay, I know what strategy is. Everyone pretty much knows what strategy is, but I'm really curious to see what it is in the academic context. How are people defining it? What are some interesting main factors that go into strategy? So if I take a little break, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, I'm just skimming an article or doing something little like that. So this specific aspect of building your routines around learning new concepts and new things, that is what comes to mind when you said routine seeking.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure there are more ideas which, again, maybe we can see those ideas in the comments. I think that this topic is interesting to explore in terms of how routine seeking can become actually the supporter of adaptation and of learning. So let us know.